War is an algorithm. We will show its price. In 2003, the United States spent approximately $60 billion to destroy Iraq's infrastructure. By 2020, American corporations had received over $138 billion in reconstruction contracts. The same companies that supplied weapons to demolish bridges, power plants, and water systems then won bids to rebuild them. This is not irony. This is business. The reconstruction economy operates on a simple principle. Destruction creates guaranteed demand. Unlike competitive markets where companies must innovate or lower prices, post-conflict reconstruction offers captive markets, desperate governments, and aid budgets that must be spent. The incentive structure is clear. Build it. Bomb it. Bill for both. The Iraq prototype. They said, shock and awe will bring swift victory, then rapid reconstruction and democracy. They got a 20-year cycle of destruction, partial rebuilding, renewed conflict, and perpetual contracts. The invasion phase lasted 3 weeks. The reconstruction phase is still ongoing. Between 2003 and 2012, the U.S. government allocated approximately $60 billion for Iraq reconstruction through various agencies and programs. According to the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, roughly 40% of this funding went to security costs rather than actual rebuilding. Of the remainder, significant portions returned to American contractors. The top 10 contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan received 52% of all reconstruction contracts between 2002 and 2018, according to analysis by the Center for Public Integrity. These same firms held defense contracts for weapon systems, logistics, and military support. They profited from destruction. Then they profited from reconstruction. Then they profited from the security required to protect reconstruction. Then they profited from renewed conflict when reconstruction failed. Halliburton's subsidiary, KBR, received over $39 billion in Iraq-related contracts. Bechtel received $2.3 billion specifically for infrastructure reconstruction. Fluor Corporation, Perini Corporation, Washington Group International, the names repeat across both military and reconstruction contracts. The economic model is self-sustaining. Incomplete reconstruction creates instability. Instability requires security. Security requires contractors. Contractors bill cost-plus arrangements where profit is a percentage of expenses. The incentive to finish quickly disappears. The incentive to inflate costs emerges. A 2011 audit found that of $8 billion allocated for Iraq's electricity sector, most projects remained incomplete or non-functional years after contract completion. Power generation in 2010 was barely above pre-invasion levels despite massive expenditure. The money was spent, the infrastructure was not built, the contracts were fulfilled. The Afghan template. Afghanistan refined the model. Between 2001 and 2021, the United States spent approximately $145 billion on Afghan reconstruction, according to the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. This figure excludes direct military operations, which totaled over $800 billion separately. Of the $145 billion in reconstruction aid, approximately 90% returned to donor countries through contractor fees, consultancy costs, and procurement of materials and services from donor nations. Afghanistan received the economic activity. Donor nations received the money. The Afghan reconstruction generated more waste than the entire annual GDP of Afghanistan. Before the war, Afghanistan's GDP was roughly $4 billion. At peak reconstruction spending, annual aid flows exceeded $15 billion, nearly 4 times the entire economy. This created inflation, corruption, and an aid-dependent system that collapsed when funding stopped. Cigar documented systematic waste. A $43 million compressed natural gas station that should have cost $500,000. A $150 million power plant that delivered electricity to almost no one. Schools and clinics built in Taliban-controlled areas that were never used. The projects existed on paper. The contracts were real. The payments cleared. Who received these contracts? According to Brown University's Costs of War project, the same defense contractors that supplied military operations. 60% of Reconstruction funds went to 5 major contractors, all of which also held Pentagon contracts for weapons, vehicles, and military support services. The system created peculiar incentives. Reconstruction projects in secure areas would reduce the need for security contracts. Therefore, projects were often located in contested areas, requiring extensive security, transportation, and insurance costs, all billable. A $2 million school became a $10 million project when security, transport, and overhead were included. The Syria forecast. Syria represents the next iteration. The World Bank estimates reconstruction costs at $400 to $500 billion over 15 years. Syria's pre-war GDP was approximately $40 billion. Reconstruction will cost 10 to 12 times the entire pre-war economy. Who will receive these contracts? The pattern suggests the same firms that supplied weapons to various parties in the conflict will position themselves for reconstruction. Russian companies are already negotiating contracts in government-held areas. Turkish firms operate in northern regions. Iranian contractors work in strategic zones. The European Union and Gulf states have pledged billions in conditional reconstruction aid. These pledges come with requirements. Materials must be sourced from donor countries, contractors must meet donor standards, consultants must be hired from donor nations. The aid is tied. The money circles back. Early estimates suggest 70 to 80% of Syrian reconstruction funds will return to donor economies through procurement and contracting. Syria will receive buildings. Donor nations will receive the reconstruction budget. The debt will remain in Syria. This creates a perverse long-term cost. Syrian debt to GDP ratio before the war was approximately 30%. Post-reconstruction, with borrowed funds for rebuilding, estimates suggest it could exceed 200%. The country will spend decades repaying loans taken to rebuild what was destroyed, essentially paying rent on its own infrastructure. The Gaza cycle. Gaza demonstrates reconstruction as perpetual motion. Since 2007, the territory has experienced 4 major conflicts: 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, and 2021, with another in 2023-2024. Each conflict destroys infrastructure. Each ceasefire brings reconstruction pledges. Each reconstruction phase ends before completion. Each new conflict destroys the partially rebuilt infrastructure. The 2014 conflict caused an estimated $4 to $6 billion in damage, according to the UN. International donors pledged $5.4 billion for reconstruction at the Cairo conference. By 2021, less than half had been dispersed, and less than a quarter had reached actual construction. The 2021 conflict destroyed infrastructure that was still being rebuilt from 2014. The UN estimated $500 million in damage. New pledges were made. The cycle continued. Reconstruction in Gaza operates under siege conditions. Materials must be imported through restricted crossings. This creates artificial scarcity and inflated costs. Cement, steel, and glass cost 40 to 60% more than regional market prices. Every reconstruction project includes a conflict premium. The economic incentive structure becomes visible. Hamas taxes reconstruction materials entering Gaza. Israel controls the flow of materials, creating leverage. International contractors bill for security, delays, and restrictions. Donors spend money that creates economic activity in their own countries while generating minimal actual reconstruction. The UNRWA and other agencies become permanent institutions. Reconstruction becomes a recurring budget line item, not a one-time expenditure. Employment in aid and reconstruction becomes a significant sector of the economy. The system perpetuates itself. The cost distribution. Who pays, who profits? Taxpayers in donor countries fund reconstruction through aid budgets. Citizens in conflict zones lose homes, businesses, and livelihoods. International contractors receive the bulk of reconstruction spending. A 2015 analysis by the Overseas Development Institute found that for every dollar of reconstruction aid, approximately 70 to 80 cents returns to the donor country economy through contracts, consultants, and procurement. The recipient nation receives 20 to 30 cents in actual economic activity. The multiplier effect works in reverse. If $10 billion is pledged for reconstruction, perhaps $2 to $3 billion generates actual economic activity in the conflict zone. The rest circulates through donor country contractors, suppliers, and service providers. This explains why reconstruction rarely reduces poverty or restores pre-war economic conditions. The money flows through the economy without accumulating as capital. It is consumption, not investment. It replaces what was destroyed without adding productive capacity. Iraq's per capita GDP in 2002 was approximately $2,500. After $138 billion in reconstruction spending, Iraq's per capita GDP in 2019 was approximately $5,000, barely double, despite more than a decade of intensive reconstruction. For comparison, Vietnam's per capita GDP grew from $400 in 2000 to $3,500 in 2019 without reconstruction aid, through manufacturing and export growth. The reconstruction spending created economic activity, but not economic development. The difference is critical. Activity is temporary. Development is accumulating. Reconstruction creates jobs during the project. Development creates productive capacity after the project. The contractor incentive. Cost-plus contracting is standard in reconstruction zones. The contractor receives costs plus a percentage profit. If costs are $100 million and profit is 10%, the contractor receives $110 million. If costs increase to $150 million, profit becomes $15 million. The incentive to minimize costs disappears. The incentive to inflate costs emerges. Delays become profitable. Change orders become revenue opportunities. Unforeseen circumstances become expected. A 2013 report by the Commission on Wartime Contracting estimated that between $31 and $60 billion had been lost to waste and fraud in Iraq and Afghanistan reconstruction contracts. This represents 12 to 25% of total reconstruction spending. Not mismanagement, fraud, deliberate overbilling, phantom projects, and kickback schemes. The contractors face minimal accountability. War zones have limited oversight capacity. Auditors cannot access sites. Documentation is incomplete. Legal jurisdiction is unclear. By the time fraud is discovered, contracts have ended, companies have restructured, and funds are gone. The repeat customer model. The reconstruction economy benefits from repeat business. A completely rebuilt nation is a closed market. A partially reconstructed nation is an ongoing revenue stream. This explains incomplete projects. The $43 million gas station in Afghanistan was never meant to succeed as a gas station. It was meant to justify the contract, employ the consultants, and create billable hours. Its failure ensures future projects to fix the problem it was supposed to solve. The same logic applies at scale. If Afghanistan were fully reconstructed with functioning infrastructure, the aid budget would decrease. Contractors would leave, revenue would increase. Therefore, the optimal strategy is perpetual reconstruction. Sufficient progress to justify continued funding, insufficient completion to close the contract. This is not conspiracy. This is incentive alignment. No individual decides to perpetuate reconstruction. The system rewards incompletion and punishes success. Contractors who finish quickly and under budget lose future opportunities. Contractors who discover complications, require extensions, and encounter unforeseen costs demonstrate realistic understanding of complex environments. The generational debt. The ultimate cost is not borne by contractors or aid budgets. It is borne by the nations being reconstructed through debt service. Reconstruction loans create decades of repayment obligations. Syria's estimated $400 to $500 billion reconstruction cost, if financed through loans at 3% interest over 30 years, would require approximately $20 to $25 billion in annual debt service. This exceeds Syria's entire pre-war government budget. The nation becomes a debt-servicing machine. Tax revenues flow to foreign creditors. Investment in education, healthcare, and development becomes impossible. The economy operates to service reconstruction debt incurred to repair war damage. Iraq provides the precedent. Despite oil revenues of $50 to $100 billion annually, the government struggles with debt service from reconstruction loans and war reparations. Money that could fund universities or hospitals instead pays interest to international financial institutions. The reconstruction thus becomes a mechanism for permanent extraction. The conflict destroys physical capital. The reconstruction converts destroyed capital into financial debt. The debt extracts resources indefinitely. The algorithm revealed. The Reconstruction cartel is not a conspiracy. It is an economic system with predictable incentives and outcomes. Destruction creates demand. Demand creates contracts. Contracts create revenue. Revenue creates lobbying. Lobbying maintains the conditions that create destruction. No single actor controls the system. Each participant responds rationally to incentives. Defense contractors sell weapons because demand exists. Reconstruction contractors bid for projects because aid exists. Donor governments allocate aid because domestic political pressure exists. The system self-perpetuates. The cost is not the billions spent. The cost is the opportunity never taken. Every dollar spent rebuilding destroyed infrastructure is a dollar not spent building new productive capacity. Every year spent reconstructing is a year not spent developing. Afghanistan spent 20 years rebuilding what war destroyed. Vietnam spent 20 years building what had never existed. One remains dependent on aid. The other manufactures electronics for global markets. The difference is not culture or geography. The difference is that reconstruction maintains while development transforms. One replaces. One creates. One consumes aid. One generates exports. The Reconstruction cartel ensures the first path remains more profitable than the second. This is the algorithm. This is the price. Subscribe to What War Costs. We count what others ignore.